Hello, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode. And in the last episode, we were able to kind of implement our chat logic, and then everything seems to be working okay. So, based on that, I've came up with a list on what we need to resolve to actually complete the whole chat app. And here is my list. So the first item is store last chat. So the idea around the air is that if we go to the app, as we can see, it says click on the user to start chatting. So what we can do is that when we click on the user, we should store that user as the last chat on our local storage so that whenever we come back to the platform, we can first check if that user exists. And if it exists, then we automatically load that user and the chat information up, or then we show the user the screen. That's the plan for that. Then currently we've not implemented the uploading of profile picture. We'll also consider that. Then updates of read messages. So update stroke read message. So the idea around here is that when you view a message, we want to update the message that you've read it. Okay, and this should also affect the content shown here. All right. Then also favorite user. So when you click on the user, we have this star here to allow you favorite Ben Tennyson. So you add Ben Tennyson to your favorite list. And what happens is that the users you've added to your favorite list comes up first. So when you have your user list, so those that are your favorite comes up first. Then view user profile. So currently you can view your own profile. However, you can't view the other user's profile. So we want to also work on that. Always scroll to the bottom. Yeah, I mentioned this in the last episode. So currently, this is meant to be at the bottom, but as you can see, we had to scroll manually to get there. So we want to make this an automatic functionality. Then paginate user, okay, search user lists. Yeah, we want to also implement the search users so that we can, although we really don't have more users to search, I guess we have to add more users so that we can test that. So paginate user list as well. So yeah, we are going to have pagination for both messages and users so that when we have above 20 messages and when you scroll to a particular point, you should be able to load the former messages. So is pagination just a different implementation flow? Then the same thing for the user list, the same flow. Then other users list with favorite users coming first. Yeah, I think I mentioned this. So the favorite users comes first. Then we resolve pending message count. Okay, I think that is associated with this. So this particular count here. So the ones at the bottom, so like for instance, the ordering of users, resolving pending message counts, and social authentication are backend related. So as a result, I push them down. So the ones that are on the top, this first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these first 8 items are front end related, and we are going to resolve them now. So starting from the one at the top, so store last chat. Okay, so let's do that. So if we go back in our code, let's clean up. Right, so we are back on a blank sheet. So if we go back to the pages, then home. All right, so here is chat interface, active user. Okay, so we are able to click on this active user when we click on the user list. So let's go back to the user lists. So clickable on click set active user. All right, so here is what we want to actually get. So as we are setting this user here, we are also pushing it to our local storage to set as the last user. Okay, so let's quickly do that before we actually dispatch. So let's say local storage dot set item. So let's create a variable for this so that it becomes easier to get later on. So I'll come under the helper. So let's use the helper, and I can just create a const. So export const last user chat. Alright, so that's the last user search. So that's the variable name. Alright, so I increase the font a little more. Alright, so if we go back to the user list, and at this point we can now get the last user search. So last user search, and that would be the user data. So this is currently a JSON data. We would convert this to a string. So to do that, we just have JSON.stringify user data. Alright, so that's done, and we've been able to store the user to the local storage. So let's see this in action. So we go to our application, then local storage. Okay, so currently there is nothing there. Oh, okay, there is meant to be your token, your login credentials here, but I cleared it out. So let me try and log in again. Alright, so that's your token information. Alright, so if we now click on the user, we get the user information, last user search and chat. Okay, now what we want to do is when we are loading our users to our user list and this particular key exists, so we want to check if that user exists on our user list, and if it does, then we want to push that last chat rather. Alright, so let's do that. So here is where we are loading our users. So this is the results. So now check, so we can just call a function to check if the user exists. So check last chat. Alright, so let's send in the results to it. Then let's create a function to handle this. Alright, so the parameter we sent here is the users. Okay, so let's confirm by console logging that. So if we go to our console, we can see the user lists. Okay, so here is it. So now what we want to do now is to get the existing user if it exists. So let's do that. Alright, so here is what we have. So we defined a variable, then local storage.get item. So the variable name we defined in our helper is what we are making use of. So the first thing we want to do is to check if this actually exists. So if last user search and user chat, then that's when we want to actually get the user information. So what we want to do here is we want to dispatch this particular information. But first we need to pass it. So JSON dot pass last user chat. Oh, actually we can't dispatch yet. So we are meant to check if the user exists here before we dispatch. So let's check that. So first let's pass it. And as a result, I'll change this to a let so that we can just reuse the variable name. Alright, so we've passed it. So the next thing is to check if the user data matches the one we are getting from the results. Okay. So once again, let's print out the users so that we actually don't commit blunder. So I'll print out the users, then also print out the last user search and user chat. So I can remove the dispatch for now. All right, so we can check through to see what we have on our console. Yeah, so our user list is this. So the ID is 3 and the user ID is 4. All right, so I think we can just compare the ID directly. Okay, so we can have our filter. So let's say if users dot filter into the item, then item dot ID is equivalent to last user search chat dot ID. So we are checking the length here because a filter will return an array. So we are checking if there is actually data there, then we can then dispatch that last chat user. All right. So let's see this. All right, we have an error. Unexpected token at position 0. Okay, we don't need to pass this again. So we've already passed it. So let's just send the normal data. All right. So now this looks good. So every time we log out, so unless we log out now, so the idea is that when we log out, the whole thing should be cleared out. So anytime we log out, we should not have a last chat. But by default, you won't get logged out by default. So you should just be able to load the last chat you had. Okay. So let's quickly register removal of the last chat user on our logout function. All right, so here is our logout function. So we removed token name. So we also remove, so local storage dot remove item last user's chat. All right, so that's all cleared out. Okay, so I think we've resolved the first part, which is store last chat. All right, so the next one is to upload profile picture. Okay, so let's quickly test that we can even upload our profile, our basic profile. So let me just change this to the family grades and updates. Okay, detail not found. So there is actually an issue with an update. So let's see how to resolve this first before actually changing the picture. So let's open the network to see what we tried to do. All right, so let's re-update and see what happens. Okay, so patch 404 not found. So we tried to patch profile 2 and it looks like that profile doesn't even exist. Okay, so the error we are having here is that we are trying to patch the profile. However, we are sending the user ID. Okay, so this is meant to be the profile ID. Okay, so let's quickly resolve this. Profile data. All right, so we are going to just replace this with props.userdetail.id. All right, so let's check this out. Okay, so let's try it again at FM grades. All right, so that's successful, and if you see this now, it's changed automatically. So what we want to do now is to actually implement this. So currently we can't even click on this. So let's start from there. All right, so for us to be able to click on this change picture, we need something to allow this. So by default, we need an input, a file input. However, we don't want to show that here. So to do this, we can create a separate variable. So it shouldn't be outside, it should be like a global variable. So let's just have this as profile ref, and that's all. Then now we can come down to here, so somewhere close to your button. It doesn't really have to. We are going to use that variable to track it anyway. Then you can create an input field that is type of file. Then let's just give it a style of display none, display none. Then we want to give it a reference. So we will get an event. So event, then the profile ref equals to this event. Okay, and that's our input. Now if we can now put an onClick function on this. So onClick. So we want to click on that reference. So it's now going to become profile ref dot click. All right. So with this, we should be able to pull up our files when we click on change picture. So let's try that. Okay, so this brings it up. All right. So the next thing now is to actually undo the unchange, and that will still be on the input element. So unchange. So we can just undo the unchange itself. So undo unchange. All right, so let's create our function to undo unchange. So we are still going to get events and then the file itself. So within this event is where we have our file. So let's console log it to see what we got. So console.log e. And if we pull up, so let's open our console. All right, so let's try to select a picture. As you can see, we got our contents. All right. So the next thing we want to do is to actually send this image. So I'll quickly pull up the backend to see how we've implemented this so that we can send the right contents. All right, so I've gone ahead to check what we have on the backend, and we actually created a separate endpoint to undo file uploads. So that's what we are going to do. So we go back to our URLs and specify the file upload URL. So file upload URL. So this is now file upload. So the file upload URL is under the message. So file upload. All right. So and here, as soon as we selected an image, then we want to quickly format the image to what we want. So this will be let data equals to, so we need a form data. So new form data. Then our data, we can now have data.append. So we specify the name. So the name we used on the backend is file upload. Then the image itself, and that will be e.target.files. So that comes in an array. Then we get the first item. Right. So this is the data we want. Then we can now try to send this data to the backend. All right. So let's quickly create a separate variable to undo while we are loading our picture. So const uploading set uploading. Okay, by default it's false. And now when we are pushing this to the backend, we want to set uploading equals to true. And what we just want to do here is when it's loading, we want to replace this with the loading, just a loading test for now. So uploading. So if it's loading, then we want to set a loading test. So if it's not loading, that's when we want to show this. So I will still maintain this particular test format or test style. I'll just change this to loading. And I'll remove the onClick. All right. So going back here, we need to make this an asynchronous function. Then we can now send this to the backend. Right, so let's define our results. So const results equals to await, then as use handler, the method is going to be a post, the URL is going to be file upload URL, then the token. We already don't need the token for file upload, so the next will be the data, which is data, and we can now cache. So let's cache our error. So dot cache e. So let's console log it if it exists. So console.log e. All right. So now we can check if result exists. So if results, then let's console log it. So console log dot results dot data. All right. So let's check this out. Okay. File upload URL not defined. I actually thought it got that. Okay, let's just put it here. I'm pretty sure that's what we used. Okay, so let's put it here. This. Let's test again. All right, so let's inspect and let's see our network. Okay, so let's put this. All right, we got a 400 error. So no file was submitted. File upload binary. Okay, so this could only mean we did not use the right name. All right, so let me confirm once more. Okay, so the right keyword is file underscore upload and not file dash upload we used here. All right, so let's quickly replace this. All right, so we change this to file underscore upload. So let's test again. All right, so that worked now. So let's see what we have. So this is what it looks like. So file upload and this. However, for our profile picture, we are not going to send in the file upload itself. We are sending the ID because we want to be able to find the relationship between them. So for instance, let's assume we removed a user, then the profile picture for that user can automatically be removed. Okay, so what we are sending here is going to be the profile picture ID. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have on the back end so that we get the idea of where this is coming from. So under user control, under models, under user profile here. So what we are going to send is going to be the profile picture underscore ID. All right, so with that noted, we can come back to our code and actually push this to the profile details because from what we have here, we are sending the profile data eventually, right? However, we still need to kind of represent our picture here so that the user realizes that or knows that he has uploaded the picture. Okay. All right. So let's create a separate function and call this const profile pics, or just call it pp. Then set profile pics. Let's just call it set pp. Okay. So use state by default is an empty string. So what we can now do here is, so when we get our results, we can now set pp into results dot data dot file, okay, or file upload. Let's see what we have. File upload. All right. Then also we want to update the profile data. So we can now say set profile data into results. Okay, we want to actually update this. So profile data, then profile picture underscore ID is now going to be results dot data dot ID, I guess. All right. Then we can set uploading to be false. All right. So let's check this out. So we won't get any picture because we actually have not updated it. So let's change it and update. So let's just use this. All right. So we've uploaded the picture. I think we've not used the file where we're meant to. Let's go back to profile picture. All right. So here, so this becomes PP. Okay. All right. So let's test once more. All right, so as you can see, we got the picture now, and now let's try to update. All right, so everything seems to be okay. Okay, so we've not sent picture to this part, so that's why that is not showing. So we can work with that later. So now if we reload, we won't get anything, and also we won't get anything here. So we need to update the picture we are getting from profile data to PP. Right, so let's quickly check through what we have. So let's console log the profile data to see the profile picture. So this is actually going to be user detail. All right, so this is what we have as our profile picture. Now what we can do is we can say props.userdetail dot profile picture. So if this exists, so there is a way of checking this on using Lodash so that you won't have an error. But we're just going to go through the long form. So if profile picture exists, then we want to go through it. All right. So if profile picture exists, then we want to use profile picture dot file upload. Else we just want to go with the normal flow. And better still, you can change this to a question mark and can specify an empty string for a situation where we don't have the profile picture. All right, so let's check again. All right, so we get our profile picture here now, and every other thing seems to be working. So if we can still change it though if we want to. So let's say I want to use, I don't have any picture here. So let me just get some pictures and use. All right, so I've saved some images and we can use it now. So if you go to my pictures, so I can use this. So we can also change the image and we can update. And everything should still be fine. So if we reload and pull up, we should still get every other thing. So what's next now is to actually put the images at the at these points here. So let's go to the user, so this part, so user main, so user avatar, so props dot profile picture. So let's actually see what this props looks like. So console.log. Oh, okay. So we were sending the profile picture directly from the front. So let's check user lists. So profile picture is profile.picture. Then if profile picture exists, then we can send in item.file underscore upload. Else we just want to send in an empty string. So this is for the user lists. So let's go to the home. All right, so we have it here again. So the same thing, let's just copy what we have here and replace accordingly. So we just want to replace item with user detail here. So this becomes user detail. Then this also becomes user detail. All right, so let's check it out. All right, so as you can see, this is now having the image, and hopefully this too will have an image when we put that in place. So once more, let's change this image again. All right, so if we update this now, it should reflect here, as you can see. All right, so that's been resolved. I think we've done the second part. So the next part we want to do is to actually read a message. So for instance, we have a message between um, myself and Ben here. And if we look at Ben's message, we've actually not read it. Okay. So what we want to do now is we want to read messages. So for example, when we pull up messages between two users, so we want to read messages that are from another sender. So messages where we are the receivers. So that's what we want to update. All right. So if we go back to our messages, so that will be under the chat interface. And here, so at this point where we are setting our messages, okay, so that's where we want to check through this to update it. All right, so I think we have a console log here. Let's remove it. Okay. All right, so I'll remove this first. Then this. All right, so in our chat interface, let's log the message to see the structure. So console.log messages. So if we go to our console, okay, we didn't get a log. Okay. Okay, this is for submit message. So let's go to get message. So get messages. So we don't care about the reverse. Let's just copy the results. All right, so here is the messages. So what we want to take note is we want to only update messages where we are the receiver. Okay, so for instance, here this message, Ben is the receiver, so that belongs to Ben. So we can't update that as read, because if you look at our message, we should see if we've read it or not. Okay, as you can see, read. So currently it's false. So what we want to update is message where we are the receiver. All right, so to do that, we can come down here. So we can look through the messages and actually update that. So, so there are two ways of doing this. We can do it such a way that we only want to undo the messages in our view. That would be too complex to, I don't think we want to work through that part. Or we can just update the messages that we've pulled directly. So we are assuming that the user pulled them so that it could read them. So let's do this. So we look through this. So what we can do now is we can say for, or let's just use map. So dot map. So we are looping through everything. Yeah, and we will just return null. Alright, so what we want to do now is we want to check if, so let's see the structure once more. Okay, so if the item dot receiver dot id, so the receiver dot id would be the profile id. Actually, let's use the user id. So receiver dot user dot id is equivalent to the logged in user. I think we can get access to that. Yeah, logged in user. All right, so if this is the case, then we want to update that message that we've read it. So we can just say update message. So we're going to create that function later on, and we want to send the message. So item dot message, or rather item dot id, because that should be the message id. Yeah, so item dot id. So let's create this function. So message id, and yeah, let's make this an asynchronous function, and we can now have this as, so we don't need to wait. Oh, okay, we already don't need to wait, so don't, let's remove the async. We're not checking any other thing. So yeah, so we can have this as use handler. Then this is going to be a patch method, patch. Then the URL will be the message URL. So message URL plus. So we send in the message ID. Then we send in the token. Okay, so we need to get this token, and as a result of that, we need to make it an async function. All right, so we've gotten the token, then the data. So we need to specify a data here, and data we want to specify is the is read equals to true. So data is read equals to true. Right, so that's what we are sending. Okay, so yeah, so let's check it out. If there is no error. Okay, so this keeps going. Oh, okay. So we still need to do one more thing with our checks. So let's go back. All right. So we looked through this. However, we didn't. We need to confirm if the message has not been read. So if this is this, or first thing at first. So we want to check if the message has not been read first. So if item dot is read, then return. So if we've read the message, then return null. Okay, now we can test it again. All right, so we shouldn't have any issue now. So let's reload. Okay, let's reconsole. Right, so let's log the whole thing. So console log here. So it looks like we are actually chasing something else. So let's log this. So hello Ben, hello what, how are you doing? Hello, hello Ben. So we want to start with hello saying, so this should have been read. Okay, so we've read this. Okay, we've actually it was updated the other time, so it's read, it's true. Okay, so I think that is working and has been resolved. So for some reason, it looks like this number here is totally wrong. Okay, so but the is read part has been resolved, as we can see, because this is now read. So that means Ben has not read this. So if we log in as Ben, then he should be able to read this. All right, so that's for that. However, I think one thing we should also note is that when we are reading the messages, we want to find a way to update the it at this point also. However, we want to only update it when we fully read the messages, so it won't be like we are calling too much. But that will be later. So I think that will just come in handy with when we've resolved the count here so that we can easily see it. Right? So the next one is the favorite users. I'm not sure if we've actually implemented something like that on the back end, so we can't work with this yet. So let me confirm. So user profile JWT. So we don't have that yet. So I will just remove this and put it down here. All right. So view user profile. I think we can work on that. Then always scroll to the bottom. Right. So I think we will just resolve these two. Then we'll call it a day. So in the next episode, we'll continue with resolving the others. All right. So view user profile. So that's this one. So let's try and work on this. We shouldn't be doing much though. We just send the right user info. So chat interface. So let's go to home first. Then the chat interface is where all the information lies. So here is the settings where we see the user info. And yeah, if we go back to our home, we can just try and locate what we did for this. So show profile is true. Then that means we need the modal. So profile modal here. So let's just get the profile modal on the chat interface. Let's copy this. So profile modal, show profile modal. So let's define the function, the variable const show profile modal set show profile modal. So by default it's going to be false. All right. So then we can come back here. So props, then close set show profile modal false. So the user detail would be the active user, okay, which is this. Then visible is show profile modal. So is closable, yes, so that's true. Then set is closable. I don't think we need all this, but let's just have it there. So let's put this as null. So set is closable is null. So what we want to do here is view. Okay, so we want to put a view flag here, and what this will do is that so that we won't be able to update it. And finally we can come back to the settings here and unclick, so we can set show profile modal equals to true. All right, so if we go back to the profile modal itself, so we want to remove the updates based on that view. So if props not view, if props not view, if not props view, then we want to show the button. So let's confirm if we have props by the, okay, we have props. So let's see this. So profile modal is not defined. Yeah, we didn't define profile modal. So let's try and import it. Profile modal here. Now we've imported it. So if we click on this now, we should have our info. Okay. So this change profile picture too should be removed based on the user. All right. So from the look of things, we can perceive that the modal is showing abruptly. So I think it's something we can resolve later on, but that's not a major issue now. So let's go back to the home components to remove the change. Yeah, so this one. So let's just put this within a empty div. Then we can say not props.view, then show this. So if it's not props.view, that's when we want to show this. All right, so let's test again. So we have Ben, we have Dennison, we have this, we have this. So for one final thing we can do is we can add disabled flag to the input field, okay, so that we can control that with view. So disabled equals to props.view. So that is, if we have props.view, then we can't edit it at all. So let's do that as well. Okay. So let's view this user. So as you can see, we can't click on it, but we have the user info. All right, so we've resolved that as well, and we have this. So the last thing we should undo now is always scroll to the bottom. Okay, so as you can see, we are here, and this is what it shows. So we want to be able to always scroll to the bottom. Okay. All right, so for us to do this, let's create a function and call it scroll to the bottom. So under the chat interface, comes scroll to bottom. All right, so based on this, we need to give our chat message interface an ID, so the chat area actually, an ID such that we can check that to update it. So ID equals to chat area. Right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to reference that. So let's say let's chat area equals to documents dot get element by ID. So we get the element ID, so that's chat area. Then then the chat area now dot scroll top equals to the elements, that's chat area dot scroll height. So let's test that out. All right, so what we'll do now is whenever we make changes, so I will actually put this in a set timeout. Okay, so set timeout. So every 1 seconds, or let's say 500 actually, then that's when this should kick off. So what we want to do is every time we set our messages, so this is get messages. So every time we set the message, like we did here, okay, let's remove this, we no longer need it. Okay, so we set messages here as we can see. So we just want to call on the scroll to the bottom. So I want to call on this function as soon as we do that. So let's see if this works. All right, as you can see, we got it to the bottom. So let me reload so that we can see that. So as you can see, we got this. So if we type in now, so all right, so that didn't affect because we didn't get message at that point. So that means we still need to call it somewhere else. All right, so here where we submitted our message. Okay, so let's say scroll to the bottom equals to, okay, just call it, we just call it, and that should be it. So I think 300 should actually be okay. So let's test again. All right, so was good. All right, so as you can see, we got that one. Go out. Okay, so I think that's working too. And what we can do here is, I don't know if we add transition effect is going to affect. Let's try it first so that we can have a smooth transition. And there's also JavaScript animate to actually animate it so that it's much more cool looking. But let me try if we can add a transition to transition it. So let me say transition equals to dot 5x is, so let's see if this works. Let's reload. Okay, that didn't work actually. All right, so that's by the way. Okay, so I think we'll stop here in this episode, and in the next one, we'll try as much as possible to resolve all the pending fixes. All right, then. So see you guys and bye.